to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right. Well, we are live here. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the host of the Quiet Warrior Show, and we're on live streaming today on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Now, I'm excited, everybody, to have our guest with us today. I'll introduce her. She's standing by there looking great. But I want to tell you a little bit about the narrative of this show. I've been doing this show for a couple of years, and we bring people from around the world to the show to talk about their stories, to talk about business and life, and we learn from some of those backstories. And I'll tell you about how I met our guest today. But first, I'd like to welcome you, Jodi Vermaas, to the show. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Tom. It's really great to be here and great to meet you.
Absolutely. We were just talking offline, and today's a conversation. You're there in Orlando, Florida. I understand you have a second home, and I'm here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So we really will have a worldview on this show today. So Jodi, this is all about you. Tell us. I'll tell you what. I'll do something really creative. Tell us a little known fact about yourself that you think nobody knows about.
Well, we are quite known in a lot of different circles of mental health and business and adoption. Most people know I have 12 children. That's sort of what comes at first notice. I think what would catch people by surprise is that my husband and I consider ourselves not to be very good parents. So I think that often catches people off guard, that we don't actually think we're very good at it, although we have certainly taken the bull by the horns and adopted a whole bunch.
Well, that's amazing. Well, thank you for saying that. And everybody, when somebody says, I don't think I'm very good about it in leadership, that's vulnerability. And I don't think any parents are good at it. So, Jodi, I'm going to build you up a bit because I want the audience to know the greatness behind you. And, from your bio, I'm just looking at here. When I read, in addition to parenting 12 children, I stopped there. I couldn't get past it. I'm going like, what? 12 children. But Jodi is the Chief Leadership Officer of Base 4 Coaching. That's her international team. And the servant leadership model is behind a lot of what she does. She's a researcher, published author. We're going to talk about that too today, something exciting coming up. Double Ph.D. in counseling field. And you provide executive leadership to a couple of companies that you and your husband, Dr. Garry Vermaas, co-founded. And then I'm really excited to say about this Get Money, Do Good book that you're about to publish. Now, I've been honored to see the early manuscript, and it just blew me away. And so I'm not going to steal the thunder on that. We'll talk to you about that in a moment. Everybody, at the bottom of the screen, you see a little ticker. And I know if you're listening to the podcast in the future, you can't see that. But www.getmoneydogood.com is where you'll find all about our great guest today. So Jodi, why don't we just get into the story? I mean, we talked about how, your background of being Italian and then coming to America, and the book has a lot in it. Take us back where you want to start in your story. How did your life all begin?
Oh, wow. Well, take us way back. And just having read your book as well, I can kind of take some insights from that. I thought that was beautifully done. Thank you for writing that.
Thank you.
I was raised by a single mom, me, my mom, and my sister. We didn't have a lot. And so my mom impressed upon us the importance of education. And she sacrificed everything. She was a cleaning lady, just scraped whatever she could. We were the scholarship kids, but we learned how to work hard. And we learned that if you worked hard enough, you could get where you wanted to go. So I made it through one of the best high schools in the country and ended up at Columbia University pursuing my degree there. Later on, married my husband, who also was a Columbia grad. We got married in New York City, had 2 kids, lived the suburbia life, had it all. And as many of the people you mentioned in your book, and sometimes on your podcast, 2008 hit, 2009, and we lost everything. And whereas for a lot of people, that was a really dark time, and certainly we had tremendous, tremendous struggles. And I don't mean to downplay it, but for me, it was a gift. My husband came home one day and said, each of you pack a couple of duffel bags, we're moving. And we did. We left everything behind. We each got 2 duffel bags. And it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. It was simple. I felt sure-footed. I was confident. I knew we could make it. And yet I was set free from all the stuff I thought you needed to be happy. So what turned out to be quite wonderful started off as something for a lot of people that is quite a negative. But for me, it was just an awesome time to reevaluate what mattered. And from that point, we built back our companies as we knew we could. But instead of collecting stuff or collecting cars or spending it all, we decided to spend it on kids. And one by one, fought hard to adopt 10 children in addition to our 2 biological. And so the book really is the story of how we went from 2 kids to 12 and what that really looked like. And for us, just for people who don't know the story yet, in our work, we travel all over the world. We have offices everywhere. And we'd spent frequent time, especially in India, in Haiti, in China, and in Eastern Europe. And anytime we would go to these places, we were struck speechless by the poverty, by the children who weren't poor. I mean, you couldn't describe them as poor because poor seems to say that you have something. These children had nothing and no place, and no one cared. And no matter where I've gone since those moments of traveling, those 10 years ago, I always carry around that presence with me, that I'm called to do something to make a difference. And although it's only 10 kids, I have certainly not changed the world. I have fought hard, and my husband together, we fought hard to use our money and our resources to see just how many we could get from that life to a life where they did have people in their corner. And it's messy. It often does not look pretty, but it matters. And to me, that's everything.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm going on a journey in my head in so many different places. I'm already excited about this story because I've written out a bit of notes here. So everybody, I mean, listen to what Jodi just said. I mean, starting out in life, the 2008-9, I call that sort of the call to adventure in the hero's journey narrative, which is by Joseph Campbell, who left us that research. And a lot of people, Jodi, hear that call to adventure. And I have to be frankly honest. Some people, they ignore the call. They don't do anything different. They stay stuck. But you and your husband lost it all. And this incredible decision to pack 2 duffel bags. I mean, I can visually see 2 bags sitting on the floor with some stuff in it.
That's right.
And when you said you lost it all at that point, in my book, we talk about that. We went through something like that in the mid-2000s, my wife and I. And I remember it was the most painful thing, almost like stripping and shedding. When you define yourself sometimes as, the quantity of stuff equals a quality of life, and you define yourself by your career and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden it's all gone. And it's like, what do I do? And you, at that moment, Jodi, it's brilliant. It's a teaching moment, everybody. Jodi and her husband packed their bags and went, but what did they do? They went traveling the world, India, Haiti, China, poverty. And I remember watching the movie Slumdog Millionaire, Jodi, and seeing the imagery in that with some friends who'd never been there. Now, my grandparents are from India. Sadly, I haven't been, but I certainly know enough to know that, as people have told me when they come back from some of those visits, they cry. These are grown men. A friend of mine who's a CFO said it was life-changing.
Yeah.
I'm mesmerized by the children and the adoption, and I'm going to say something and hand it back to you and get you to talk about that, and then maybe you can lead into the book. That there's a fella in America that I've met through my work, and his name's Steve Pemberton, and he I think his book was called a place in this world. Now, many of us who haven't been adopted, grew up with parents, but tell us about why adopting children, why making a difference that way. And in your bio, it says an adoption memoir. That's your book, revealing your family's attempt to change the world one messy story at a time. I just love that. If you can rescue one child or one person and change the world that way, you're blessing us. But why that? And tell us about, why do you connect to that?
So we didn't go out as adoption being our first choice, because as I said, there are people who are just tremendous parents, and I have so much to learn. And I love watching it, and people who are teachers and educators, and they just have ways with children. So I wouldn't describe myself as being naturally that way. I'm much more of a coach. Of course, I adore my children, but we make a ton of errors and we laugh a lot. So when I was going out to think, as we were building our business and seeing great success and knowing I didn't want to invest in the stuff, wanted to do something, we went out and we went through many different paths trying to figure out how we could help. A lot of nonprofit world, a lot of donations, a lot of tithing at churches. And we would go visit missions. We would spend time there trying to figure out if this was the best use of our funds. And along that journey, sadly, there was a lot that was not being done well. We'll just say not well. Not always illegal, but maybe not what I wanted to invest in. Because most nonprofits today, they have a large overhead and they spend a lot on things that probably don't, at the end of the day, move the ball where we want it to go in terms of changed lives. So we set out to start our own nonprofit, which we did. Priority One Worldwide is our nonprofit, and we've done a lot of work throughout the world. We have a school in Haiti that we support. We do tremendous work there. I'm very proud of it. But again, if you don't speak Creole, if you're not able to live there, you're not there doing anything other than donating money. While donations are awesome, I don't believe that that's where real change happens. I think we have to get our hands dirty and be involved. And so that's really what we were looking for. So when we did our first adoption, it was through China. We had an office in China, and we knew of the 30 million lost girls of China. So we set out to do that. When we entered that process, which was just horrific. It's a horrific process. Anyone who's adopted knows, whether it's international or stateside, there's a lot of red tape, but we did it. We ended up adopting a 4-year-old little girl with some special needs. And from that point on, and it was incredibly difficult, which I go into in my book, to the point where you wonder, how can any good be done here? She was so unhealthy and so unattached and so unable to make her way in this world. So it took years to help her through what today I would look at as institutional autism, because she was tied up in her bed for the first 4 years of her life. So the pain of that and working her through that and how challenging it was, and sometimes not always successful, didn't necessarily inspire us to do it again. But when I look at her face and I knew, no one was going to adopt this child. She was on a list, not of children to be adopted. She was on a list of children that were supposed to be adopted. They were referred out to a family for adoption and then turned down again. So they ended up on a list of nowhere land. And all 10 of my children come from those lists. I went out to adopt children that other people were too intimidated maybe to adopt, but they were on a list of kids who nobody was going to take. And that's what we chose to do. We knew we could do it. I have a mental health background, so it was a little bit less scary. It doesn't make me more successful, but it made it less scary. I could look at it, I could see it. And we just said,
that's the one thing about your back
and say no. We can't look back and think that we said no. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something I wrote down here about the 30 missing children in China. And when you take it back from me, I'll talk about that, because not everybody might know that. It's horrible. And I want you to get into the book and share what you can, maybe even take one of the stories and share a little bit. I want people to get a sense. The hero's journey is about getting into it. I want people to feel the emotion of one of these children. Talk about one of the stories, as much detail as you can, and the 30 missing children in China. Just tell us about that too.
Sure. We started in China over 10 years ago because it was well known to us through our staff that we worked with in China that they had a one-child policy at the time. It's been slowly changing. So girls were just left out on the street. My daughter was left with her umbilical cord bloody in an old shirt, is how they found her. And they took her to an orphanage where she had very little interaction, very little food. She came to us unable to walk at 4 years old, not because she has a problem with her legs. And hers is one of the better stories of my children, but that's where we started. My daughter from India is now 13 years old. We adopted her when she was 8. She's from Kerala in the south, just
Yes.
stunningly gorgeous when you get to go. So they found her stuffed underneath in the baggage compartment of a long distance train to Mumbai. She was unconscious.
Oh,
She had been beaten. She was bloodied and left for dead and sent away on a train. Spent 6 months in a hospital for rehab. She's blind in one eye, paralyzed on her opposite side from where they struck her. And when we went to do her MRI later, her brain looks like, the white mass on the brain with just pockets of dead tissue and encephalomalacia everywhere. So the damage and the abuse, and they could tell from the age of the scarring that it had been ongoing abuse, not just that last moment. So hers is probably the most emotional, I think, for me, because not only had she been abused, but then she was left for dead. When we went to adopt her, we have to go through many different screenings to get her out of the country, to get a visa. And so she had to do a medical check. And the doctor looked at her. At this point, she had no language. She was only beeping, smiling and chewing on things at 8 years old. And he looked at her and he looked at us and he said, "Why would you want this disgusting child?"
Unbelievable.
And
I can't even fathom a human being having that thought. And yet again, somebody had that child and had that thought by putting them in the baggage compartment. It's, you have to hold back tears on this one. I want to ask you something about that. Why do you think people don't help? It's, you and I both share a lot in common about mental health, and I'm an advocate against bullying and against the stigma in society. I'm a visible minority, and I understand that when people are different, there's another challenge. But what gets in the way from people doing what you're doing? Why aren't there people who help children like this?
Well, I think you've probably come in contact with this as well. People don't like to go to these dark places because they are incredibly evil. And when we went to do something like adopt this child, it's not like they gave her to us right away. Oh, great, somebody's going to take this child off of our hands. There was a judge in her local town who didn't want to issue the paperwork because he was Hindu, we were Christian, and he just didn't want that spiritual difference. And so we had to go to court 22 times in order to adopt this child that nobody wanted in the first place. So you think, okay, it cost $50,000 for this adoption, 22 court dates, several years, and a stack of documents this large to get one child that nobody wanted anyway. And you look at the injustice, and it's hard to sleep at night. And so that's been what feeds me. But it's dark, Tom. I mean, and you get it as knowing the mental health field, people don't want to go to these places. I mean, child trafficking right now, especially during COVID, it's going up exponentially. And yet in the midst of crises and face masks and people staying at home, and I get it, and I know why, no one's talking about every 30 seconds a child is taken. And sold for body parts, for sex, or for labor. Why is this story not out there, Tom? Why? And I can only imagine it's because this is hard stuff to look at. This is hard and heavy stuff to carry. So my hope with the book was to show a positive side of what has a very dark underbelly, and to know that each one of us could change at least one life. We could make one life better. And if everybody did their part, things could be different. But I get it when people don't want to go there. I totally get it, because it is, it follows you. It will never leave me, the things that I've seen and known.
Sure.
And sometimes you wish you could unknow it.
Yeah, no, I understand. Listen, I'm in love with this story. My heart's growing each time I hear more and more. There's something about me. I think it's because I know about adversity that, the hero inside you and me, you want to help people. Thank God there's people like you in the world. The book itself, Get Money, Do Good, it's being published at some point, and the stories are in it. Everybody, I've read it, and some of the stories are hard to read, as Jodi said, but we need to read them to understand. So Jodi, let's take the other side of it. When you finally get to the other side, give us a positive or something you've seen. Take that one of those children and how life is for them now, how things have changed for the better since you've helped them?
Yes. Well, I mean, my kids are just amazing. I could get them all in here in the room if you want them because they're all running around outside. They are, more than anything, they're all joyful. And they all know they belong. And they all have a mom and a dad. And they have people in their corner. And they have each other. And that's one of the most beautiful things because each one of their stories is equally harrowing, but completely different. So I watch them going up to dinner, and you eat dinner at our house with 14 people around the table, and it's like a fraternity party. I mean, it's loud. There's dancing. There's karaoke in the kitchen. All we do is have a tremendous amount of fun in between all the parenting and the lessons and the schooling and all of that good stuff. All of us have a long way to go. Each one of us in my family, we are making our way, and some are further along than others in their healing process. But every day they're a step ahead. So there's nothing not awesome about that. I look at each one of them and I'm amazed at them. They are beautiful. They all speak clearly, go to school clearly. They're making progress. Each one of them will have meaningful jobs and relationships and lives. And we teach them your main goal in life is to do well enough to take care of yourself and then turn around and at least help one other person. And each one of them is going to do that. And so there's nothing better than that.
Oh, I can see the inflection in your face and the smile that came when you said that. I mean, it's amazing to me. And you talked about your faith a bit. I'm a faith-based person too, and we learn that God is in us, working in us, and we have a responsibility to do something in our lives for others. And what a legacy that you and your husband are. I just want to mention his name to honor him on the show here. It's Dr. Garry Vermaas, right?
That's correct.
Yes. And it's funny because we're talking about our spouses, and you said that he's fearless, and maybe you not seeing yourself that way. And my Anna, who's Italian, your background's Italian, she's fearless, and of course I'm the quiet warrior. Maybe not so fearless, but maybe my quiet nature is my strength.
That's right.
So it's pretty amazing. You said something that challenged me to go, maybe before we wrap, if you want to bring him in the room there and we just get a little video footage, we can do that. I'll leave that up to you. But I want to ask you a couple more questions. And as we I really want to honor this book. I want to recommend to everybody that when it comes out, certainly we'll get Jodi to tell us how to connect to her at the end of the show. Get on the mailing list, whatever, get this book. It's powerful. I want to talk about self-care for a minute. And, you're married, you have your relationship, and Anna and I have been married 25 years coming up. And it's not a straight line up. I've raised 2 stepkids, certainly nothing close to 10 foster kids. And now that you've said this, there's so many people I do know who can't have children. And I'm thinking there is another option out there. And maybe it's the process that's broken, or maybe it's the fears of, things that might come into our life. But self-care is interesting. I know about secondary trauma when you're dealing with things you've seen and whatnot, how that can manifest in ourselves. And then you and your husband are married and you have that relationship. How do you take care of yourself? What are your top 1 or 2 hacks, for Jodi to keep her strong for the kids, but mostly for yourself?
Yes. Well, for me, this will sound strange, but my self-care is that I get up really early. I get up at 4:15. Which sounds funny for self-care. It is my favorite time of the day. It is when I exercise. I get to read my Bible. I get to pray. I get to connect. I usually walk outside and just have several hours before, the 42 meals that I'm going to cook that day starts looking at me at the face, and before work starts piling up because we're working as we're doing all of this. And so for me, that time in the morning is really important. And I think for Garry and I, we've been married 23 years this year. And, honestly, we don't really have a lot of other hobbies. We love to work. We love to be with our family. We love to hang out with a few close friends, but we love being with each other. We're best friends. We love to scheme and plan, and we don't like to be bored, and we like to be up and going. And I think for us, similar probably to you and Anna, the adventure is very nurturing. That every day seems filled with possibilities of all the things that could come. And that makes me jump out of bed and I'm just thrilled and excited for the day. And certainly days can be hard and some don't go as you plan. But every day, if you keep hitting the same nail on the same head, you're going to get where you want to go. And there's something of legacy at the end.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I agree, and that's the part about stories like this that I know that every day is you wake up, you jump out of bed, and every day is a challenge. There's that constant work to keep moving forward. So many things you have to think about, worry about. I've learned that one of the mental health hacks is doing something you love, and hanging out with children is a way to create happiness. I mean, you live vicariously through them. They're so innocent, and it must be incredible seeing those little ones or those souls every day. Last question for you is really one that I asked myself deeply a long time ago, and it is that they say when you have this called adventure and you take it, there's a reason why you take that path. Now, for me in my work, because I'm a beacon, I coach and teach people who come from adversity in their lives. But that's because I came from a broken childhood into my adulthood with a different set of rules. And I struggled in leadership for a while until I understood that. And so, what is it in your life, in your backstory? I know you had a single parent relationship growing up, but what gives you that strength? What's your story behind all this?
So what makes me do what I do?
Yes.
At the core.
Where did you get the strength from your story growing up to do what you do, to say, what, I have to do this, and it's part of your purpose?
I've always felt compelled. My biggest fear in life is that at the end of my life, I'll look back and regret not having said yes to what's in front of me. And so I try to live my life, and I always have, saying yes. I've made lots of mistakes doing that. I've certainly looked silly and ridiculous. I've had a large fair share of judgment, but that's okay. If you can look back and know you said yes, then you'll have no regrets. And so for me, that's what I try to live by. And it's messy, it's busy, but it matters in the end. And so far, no regrets.
That's awesome. And it's interesting because you brought that to my mind about the word regret. There was a Canadian study that was done, and they asked 90-year-olds, what are your top 3 regrets? Mm. And the top 3, not in any order, were didn't reflect enough, didn't leave a big enough legacy, and didn't take enough risk. And here you have it. I mean, look at you with the taking a risk and creating a legacy. What's your biggest failure? What and you learn from?
Oh, gosh. I think the biggest failure was I can be afraid to look outside the box. Early on in my career, doing counseling, I did a lot of volunteer work. And there were things that were broken where I was at. And I didn't speak up and say, hey, this could be better. We could do better at this. And I think sometimes when it's, sometimes in the spiritual realm, sometimes it's in church world or nonprofit world, we accept a level of okay because it is nonprofit and people are trying to do good, and we don't expect ourselves just to be excellent. And so for me, it took a lot of courage to step outside of that and say, you know what? I'm not going to go the nonprofit route. I'm going to go out. My husband and I made a decision about 8 years ago. We said, we're no longer going to just volunteer our time or try to do nonprofits. We're going to go out and make as much money as we can, and then give every bit that we can to doing good ourselves and really getting it done. And I regret not having done that sooner, because I think I wasted about 10 years until we made that decision. And to be sure, Tom, that is also why people don't always like our message. There's a lot of people right now talking against capitalism. You say you're a capitalist and they are ready to hang you out to dry. And I'm not talking about big companies. I'm talking about small business, entrepreneurial, people going out and saying, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to make money and I'm going to use it for good. That's the type of get money, do good that I talk about in my book. And I think I regret not having embraced that sooner, knowing that it would be criticized, but knowing in my heart that, I can take all my talents, all my skills, use them to create resources that I can leverage to do some really neat stuff in changing other people's lives. And I kind of wish I had done it sooner, but that would probably be my biggest lesson learned.
Well, I got to honor you for your vulnerability in sharing that. And I have a sign flashing in my head that says, that there's many people out there I don't think anybody should be criticizing you and your husband for wanting to build companies, be successful. Look, here's the reality and something I learned. I learned about that buried in our subconscious minds. We have these viruses. Some people might call them flaws or, neural nets of thoughts that are connected. Some people have a negative relationship with money. And the truth is that it's okay to have a lot of money, as you said, or to make a lot of money if you are building schools, helping children. The reality is money helps people. And if there's not people like us around who have the ability and the skill and the talent you and Garry do to go build a company, to create an economic engine, and then to say, how are we going to do good with that? The world doesn't power forward. I mean, the reality is, I read somewhere there's 8 billion people on the planet, and the average, most of them live on less than $5 a day. And the truth is that your mindset, and here's something that I want you to remember, that they say most people who created wealth did it after the age of 55. Just look at Warren Buffett's bio. And you know why that is, Jodi? I'm just a rhetorical question, but you know why I think that is? It took me on my journey of being a CEO and a well-paid executive all my life to finally wake up and say, you're being selfish. And it took actually me falling and having things stripped away to realize that my real purpose is not to create things and have stuff, but to help, to take that and use it to do good. That's right. That's why I love your book.
I wanted to say, if I have a minute left, there was a moment that redefined my relationship with money. When you said that about having a negative relationship, I think being raised with less than the people around me made me have a skeptical view of money. And I think that's why it took me so long to embrace what I'm currently doing. And I remember we got the acceptance to adopt our first daughter right around 2009, when we were struggling to pay our mortgage, which we eventually would not be able to pay during the crash. And I remember my husband said, look, we have one more installment, $7,000 that we have to finish for this adoption. It's that or it's our mortgage. And we chose our daughter, and we lost the house. But I'll never forget, I sat in Nanjing, China, in the adoption welfare office with this ruined child on my lap, malnourished, distended belly. And in front of me was a money counter. And it counted, because you had to bring fresh $100 bills, 70 of them, and it just counted out that $7,000. And I sat there with this precious child on my lap as that money counter counted away our money. And I thought, I made the right choice. And from that moment on, I have never, it totally redefined my relationship with money and how I thought of it. Because if I didn't have those 70 crisp $100 bills, that little girl wasn't coming home with me. And it was life-changing for me and my relationship with money.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life, just from the way you explained that. I know people listening to the podcast. Yeah, people listening to the podcast and as we release in the future won't see you doing that, so you see the audio. But I just had this thought. My brain works three-dimensionally. That we look at adoption, the process, and all the fears people have wound up. But the reality is, when you talk about $50,000 to adopt, or a big number like that, the average person who wants to adopt children can't afford it. I think maybe we need to tackle that issue. Why should a child have a dollar figure on their head to be rescued?
That's right.
Why is it we can provide scholarships and things for education to help other people and families who have paychecks and jobs, they get subsidies here. And why do we have to have a financial barrier to adopt a child? I think that to me is a powerful message. And, everybody, I want you to get the book, Do Money, Do Good, and read it, and then connect with Jodi to support. I don't think our work's done yet, Jodi. I've just met you, and we're on a parallel journey here.
That's
and
right.
I think we're going to do some things in any way I can to help you. Do you want to bring any of those children in, or is this just going to be too awkward for you?
Downstairs, but I can send you a photo if you want to put it up on your...
Yeah. Why don't you do that? And I'm going to...
And they don't, their smiles don't match the stories I just told. So a picture is definitely worth it.
I love that. And I'll produce it into the show. What are the age range again, just before we finish up here?
So I have from 7 to 20, and my 20-year-old was adopted out of China at a very late age. So he's a senior in high school. So I have every grade covered in all of the schools, and everyone's on their way.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so exciting. Well, at this point in the show, I always, before we wrap up and let you have the last word, I want to honor you with a few what I call leadership words. And you see me looking over here on the podcast. They can't see me, but on video, writing down. So these come up in my mind as I listen to you. They're not scripted. And so these are leadership words I want to honor you with. The first one is light. You are the light, and you're the light that shines in the lives of children. 2 is leader, and I read servant leader in your bio, but you're a leader. There's no question. You are love. It comes out of you the way you express, and just with your heart. I can hear you when you talk about the stories, looking at how your face shines. And the last one, I'm going to say resilience. To have 10 children, do what you've done, and still get up in the morning and want to keep doing more. And for all leaders trying to build companies, that is a quality, that at least Napoleon Hill says the same thing. That resilience is a criteria for being successful. Now, on the back of the video, people can see my screen there. There's an image. You see that, Jodi? And I want to tell you what that is. So I'm inducting you into the Quiet Warrior Tribe. When I started this show, I was just wanted to connect to my book work and as a coach and a leader, that I wanted to bring people who would put the BS meter on hold and come in and authentically share their story. And not like many who say, look how great I am, but come in and say, no, these are how I failed. And this is how I got to where I am. And every year we honor them with an award. So behind you, you have what's called the Quiet Warrior Challenge Coin. A challenge coin started in the World War II era, and they were used to create communities. So soldiers would come and they're carrying them in their units. If you didn't have one, maybe you bought dinner or drinks. And around the world today, they're used by Alcoholics Anonymous and the police force everywhere to create community. So I had this coin custom designed in the United States. Sorry, Canada. And the front of it is the show art for the radio show. And the back of it is actually the hero's journey narrative. It's beautifully designed. They're handcrafted and painted, raised letters. It comes in a cherry box. And so today I honor you and bring you into the Quiet Warrior Tribe. And you make the commitment to continue taking action with this purpose you have to change the lives of people. And you're special. And so every week when I release more shows, you're going to meet more and more quiet warriors like yourself. So congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much, Tom. That's awesome. I look forward to it.
You're welcome. And so now we're going to turn it back to you. Tell us how we can get a hold of you and your body of work, your book, whatever you need.
Yes, I have a website, www.getmoneydogood, which you have there. And on it, you can reach me. I get the emails directly, and I'm always looking to talk to people. I do a blog every week as well to talk about issues such as the price of adoption, human trafficking, how to do good, how to make money so that you can do good. And I love to start conversations, to engage with people doing the same thing or wanting to figure out how to do it. So it's really a website for storytellers and people who want to pull together and create a community of people wanting to figure out how to make a difference. So I would love to hear from your viewers.
That's awesome. Well, we were going to give double value. This is just a live stream. We interrupt the airwaves. You never know who's going to hop on. We're going to produce this into a radio show, and I'm going to make a commitment to you. We'll talk about it offline to write. I'm an author, writer, a article for LinkedIn that'll feature your interview and maybe that picture of the children. And I will look at releasing that as well. Everybody get the book, Get Money, Do Good when it comes out. Connect to Jodi now to get on the list. And Jodi, we'll have you back again in the future, I'm sure, to talk about more stories as this one evolves.
Yes, more to come.
All right, fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you for watching the live stream. This will be released on an international podcast very soon. And find the podcast, The Quiet Warrior Show, on your favorite internet channel. Give this episode a high rating to honor Jodi's work when you find it. And live that life like you see Jodi does, with your true passion, with purpose, and live the life that you deserve and desire. Thank you. Thank you, Jodi.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca